Hello everyone, this is Highlander from MTG Cardsmith doing a custom Magic the Gathering card review, and let's start a riot, let's start a riot. This is a card called Riot by TGBC from his set Battle for Freedom. Okay, so let's see what we got here. We got a 5-mana Rage enchantment. Okay, I talked about Rage in the last video, Angel's Assault. So you may want to watch that one first. And this is a rare. As long as Riot is on the battlefield, put a charge counter on it whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield. Okay. When Riot has 5 or more charge counters on it, remove them all and sacrifice Riot. Creatures you control deal damage equal to their converted mana cost to creatures your opponents control. Add 1 rage mana to your reserves for each creature on the battlefield. Okay. So first of all, has Wizards really not printed a card just named Riot? Riot Control, Riot Devils? I guess not. No card called Riot. Riot Spikes. Okay. All right, you get off there. Sorry, what I mean is you're off the hook. Get it. Poor choice of words. Okay, so let me reread this. So as long as Riot is on the battlefield, put a charge counter on it whenever you control a creature you control leaves the battlefield. When Riot has 5 or more charge counters on it, remove them all and sacrifice Riot. Creatures you control deal damage equal to their converted mana cost to creatures your opponents control. Add 1 rage mana to your reserves for each. Okay, so I get what you're doing here. I like the flavor of this card. It's cool, right? Because it's like, basically like a certain number of your creatures die, and then it's like, all right, we've had enough. It's time for us to riot. And then, everybody riots, right? But once again, I have a few issues with this design. So there's some let me just go through some of the wording issues first. So you don't need this clause right here where it says as long as Riot is on the battlefield. That's just like a given, right? So what you would probably want to say here is whenever a creature you control leaves the battlefield, put a charge counter on Riot, or hey, make it a rage counter. Why not? The other thing is leaves the battlefield is a little bit of a flavor fail here, right? Because like it is a little bit more flexible in that way. Like it gives you sort of more triggers, but the idea here with Riot is that your creatures are dying, right? I mean, if somebody leaves, like that doesn't cause people to riot, right? Like dying does. So I would rather have this say dies. Like let me. Whoops. You're not supposed to see that. So let's see. So this could easily say whenever a creature you control dies, put a let's make it a rage counter. Put a rage counter on Riot. Okay. And then when Riot has 5 or more charge counters on it, remove them all and sacrifice Riot. Creatures you control deal damage equal to... Right, so here's an issue. So this says creatures you control deal damage equal to their converted mana cost to creatures your opponents control. So this is actually confusing because you're not specifying which, like, you're not... I actually don't know how you're intending this card to work because of the way this is worded, right? So either you could say this, right? You could say like each creature you control deals damage equal to its mana value to or okay, sorry, let me read this. For each creature you control, that creature, I don't actually know how to word this. There's like one variant of this where it's like, okay, for every one of your creatures, you can have them target a different creature. Basically, is what I'm getting at. So it's like they're throwing at different things. Or there's another version of this where it's like all of your creatures combine their mana values and deal that much damage to every creature your opponent control, but it's not clear here what's exactly what your intention is. Creatures you control deal damage equal to convert mana cost. So to creatures your opponents control, it's just confusing. Like I don't understand exactly what your intention here is. I think maybe your intention is that like you basically add up all your creature mana values and then deal that much to every creature your opponent controls. But it definitely needs a rewording, because at the moment I don't understand what this is doing exactly. And then you get 1 rage mana. Okay, for each creature on the battlefield. All right, so that's the wording issue here. And the other issue I have is so I like this one flavor wise, but what kind of doesn't work here is you have to think about how this card actually plays out, right? So the best shell for this would be in like a sacrifice deck, right? So let's just think about that in this scenario, okay? So you play Riot, and there's a couple ways you can play this, right? Let's just say you play Riot and you sacrifice 5 creatures, okay? If you do that, you're very unlikely to have enough creatures to actually do that much damage to them, right? Because all your creatures are dead. So like all the rioters died before the riot even started, you know. And then there's like another scenario where like you play this and you're like slowly sacrificing things. Like you kind of like keep your board in a certain state to where it can do damage, but then like you have to make sure that like you're you're drawing enough creatures to like make it so you can actually trigger this thing. And flavor wise, I guess that's kind of cool because it's like, oh, the riot's brewing, it's coming. But like from like a gameplay perspective, if that were the case, I just wouldn't really want to play this card in that situation, because it just like doesn't do anything for such a long time, and you have to have a board for this to actually do anything. You know what I mean? Like, here's another situation, right? You play Riot, they wipe the board, and then this triggers and does nothing, right? Because they've wiped your board, so which is like really risky, because you don't have any creatures in play, right? And the other thing is like this adds rage mana to your reserves for each creature on the battlefield, but by the time this thing goes off, there's going to be so few creatures on the battlefield. It feels like not only do a lot of your creatures have to die, but you're killing their creatures now, and now like I guess whoever's left standing gets angry or whatever. But like, you know, so that kind of works from a flavor standpoint, but it's just like kind of awkward from a gameplay perspective. So this card doesn't quite come together for me in that way. It's a cool idea, but I would love to see it done in a little bit more of a way that plays better. You know what I mean? Like you're, you know, when you make a flavorful card, it doesn't have to like be, what am I trying to say here? Let me put it this way. So the most important thing about a Magic card above everything else, okay, is how the card plays, right? Like, gameplay is the most important thing, because that's the fun part about Magic, right? Is the gameplay. So the gameplay needs to be good. That's first and foremost. Now, flavor is great. I love flavor, right? But you don't want to sacrifice gameplay in the name of flavor. And so your cards don't need to have exact perfect flavor for them to still be flavorful and tell a story. So I'm gonna bring up a card that I made, and I'm not doing this because I'm like, Mr. Perfect, which I'm certainly not. But the reason I'm doing this is because I've recently been making some reference cards, just as sort of an experiment. And here's one of the ones that I made. And I'm showing this off as an example. All right, so here's Batman. Okay, now Batman, when he enters the battlefield, you get 2/1 colorless battering artifact creature tokens with flying. Okay, and then you can sacrifice an artifact, and then either he gains flying or you tap a creature, right? So, basically the idea is that Batman uses gadgets to fight, right? So you get these 2 batarangs, and then you can use that, you can use artifacts you can use gadgets to do Batman things, right? But here's the thing. If I wanted to make this card like perfectly flavorful, I would change some things about it, right? Okay, why can batarangs attack and block? Well, I mean, they kind of can't really, So like I would probably say like, when Batman enters the battlefield, you create 2 batarang artifact tokens, and they like don't do anything. And then, or maybe I'd give them like 2 batarang counters, and then I would say like remove a batarang counter and do one of these things, right? But like, and that actually wouldn't even work. You'd have to have like 2 like gadget counters or something, right? Because in this case he's using his grappling hook, and in this case he's using a battering to stun somebody. So like, there's a way I could have worded this to where like everything like makes perfect sense, right? But I think this version is just a better design and plays better, right? Because you play this guy, you play Batman, and now you get these 2 little batarangs, and you get to like sort of hit your opponent with these batarangs over and over again. You can use them to block. Like, there's just a lot of gameplay there, and not only that, but he doesn't have to sacrifice a batarang to do these things. It can be any artifact, and the reason for that is it makes it a more flexible card. You can use Batman more than twice, and you probably don't even want to sacrifice these batarangs because these batarangs are good. They're 1/1 flying artifact tokens, right? You probably want to chip in on your opponent with them. And it sort of incentivizes you to play an artifact deck, so it's like, it just gives you more flexibility, lets you use Batman more often, lets you use his abilities. Anyway, so that's the point I'm trying to make, is like, this card isn't perfectly flavored, but it's flavorful enough that you get it, and the gameplay is much better for it, right? And here, like, the problem with this card is that it sort of anti-synergizes with itself. Like, your creatures dying is what causes the riot to go off, which is cool flavor-wise, and then creatures you control are attacking their creatures, which is cool flavor-wise, but the 2 things don't really mesh very well, because your creatures dying means you're going to have fewer creatures on the board, right? So, and it like non-bows with itself by adding rage mana for each creature on the battlefield. So I would rather see this card simplified, where it was basically something like this, where it's like, whenever a creature you control dies, put a rage counter on Riot, okay? And then you would say like, sacrifice. Let's see. How about, I don't know what order you would do this in, but sacrifice Riot, remove all. Blah, 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 blah. I guess you could say when Riot has 5 or more charge counters on it, remove. Let's see. You don't need to remove them in this case. Sacrifice it. Riot deals 5 damage to each creature your opponent control. Period, right? So here, like, whenever a creature you control dies, you get a rage counter. Once you get 5 rage counters, you sacrifice it, deals 5 damage to each creature, right? this still makes sense flavor-wise to me, where it's like, I get it, you know, whenever a creature dies, you know, people get angrier and angrier, and eventually, bam, boom, you know. Or you could even do something like this. You'd say when a Riot has 5 or more charge counters on it, sacrifice it. Create 5 1/1 red human creature tokens with haste, right? Or something like, you know, 10 or, like, you know, whatever, right? Create a bunch of rioters and have them start rioting, you know, like, or you could do this, like create 5 1/1 red human creature token with haste, and whenever this creature attacks, it deals 1 damage to, you know, any target, for example, right? Like something like this. Like, this is really flavorful, because all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, so your creatures die, and then all of a sudden everyone comes out of their houses and they're angry, they got haste. When they attack, they deal 1 damage to anything. They start rioting. It makes, you know, like, you know, in this case, you're still like creating this riot effect, but it just like works better because you've lost a bunch of creatures, and now you get a bunch of creatures back. You know what I mean? So anyway, I think you get what I'm trying to say. There's kind of a bit of anti-synergy with this card, and I think there's quite a few ways you could change it to make it keep its storytelling ability, but improve the gameplay. And the last thing I'll say is I don't like the art because it's basically just a picture. So, but I think you knew that was coming. Okay, so I'm gonna have to give Riot a 2 out of 5. Again, like I like what you're trying to do here, but it just doesn't come together. You know, I encourage you to really think about how your cards play out as you design them, and use that to sort of, you know, find a nice balance between storytelling and gameplay. So, okay, so 2 out of 5 for Riot. Thank you guys for watching.